Alright, so welcome back. Setson here. In today's video, I want to introduce you to game development using Pygame. Pygame is a Python library that we use to create video games. So before we get into that, there's something that I want to talk about in general about video games. Creation of video games can be done by large companies, and so this requires a lot of money, a lot of technical support, and there's a lot of time that is invested in creating these games, and we call these games AAA games. And then on the other end, we have individuals or small companies that decide to create video games. They don't have huge capital investments. They don't have a lot of people to work with. They are smaller groups. And so these video games are called indie, short for independent video games. However, there's something that is common with these games. They are built on what we call a game engine. So every video game that you play is built on top of what we call a game engine. Alright, so what is a game engine? So a game engine is a piece of software designed for the creation and development of video games. It offers tools that make game development much easier. These are some of the functionalities that is offered by a game engine. It allows you to interact with sound. It allows you to do rendering of your video game. It allows you to do collision detection, physics, animation, memory management. However, it's not limited to these only. There are a lot more that is offered by a game engine. Alright, let's look at some of the most popular game engines that we have on the market. So we have Game Maker Studio, we have Cocos Creator, we have Unreal Engine, we have Unity. There is quite a lot of them, but it wasn't the same a few years ago. A few years ago, if you wanted to make a video game, you had to create your own game engine. Right, so nowadays it's a bit easy to create a video game. If you get into game development, you are likely to interact with some of these game engines. Alright, so where does Pygame come in? Pygame is also considered as a game engine. However, it's more of a library. So Pygame is a multimedia library for games and multimedia applications. Pygame is built on another game creation library called Simple Direct Media Layer, SDL, which is written in a language called the C language. It's written in this language because C can easily interact with the hardware. So that's why it was written in C. So Pygame is just a wrapper or a binding of this SDL library. Pygame package contains a number of modules that can be used independently. These modules give programmers access to graphics, sound, keyboard, and other input devices on various operating systems. And so if Pygame is able to give me access to graphics, sound, keyboard, it's a game engine. That's what a game engine offers. Alright, so the modules contain classes, methods, attributes that enables creation of Pygame objects. And so later on, when we start working with Pygame, you will see that we will be creating objects. Inside this Pygame package, there are sub-modules that I want to talk about. And so this is important for you guys to understand, because this is what you're going to use as your building blocks when you're creating your games. Right, so for you to access these sub-modules, you have to use the name Pygame. You have to prefix these sub-modules with the name Pygame. So you're going to go pygame.something, pygame.something. For instance, pygame.display. If you want to access the display, you got to use that module, and then you create your own display for your game. If you want to draw something, you have to use pygame.draw. Interact with any event, you have to use pygame.event. And there are quite a lot of these modules that you have to interact with. However, you have to keep this in mind. You're not going to be using all of these. You're going to use some of these. But of course, there are some which are required. For instance, the display module is required for nearly each and every game that you build, because you need some kind of a display for your game. And so 99.9% of the time, you will need the pygame.display module. 99% of the time, you will need the pygame.event module, because when somebody plays your game, they are going to interact with your game, and thereby creating what we call events. All right, so we are going to run through the installation of Pygame. You just have to use a package manager in Python called pep, and so you just run the command pip install Pygame, and so this is what we're going to do next. All right, so you have to open your terminal. So I'm on a Windows computer. I open my terminal over here, and let me bring this closer so that you guys can actually see. So I have to write this simple command. Of course, I have to check whether I do have Python, because it's a Python package. I should have Python installed on my computer. So I'm going to run Python -- version. So if you're on a Mac or Linux, you should write this as Python 3 or Py3, yeah. And then -- version, and you can check out the version of Python that you do have. It must be lower than 3.11, otherwise it's not going to work, because Pygame is not compatible with version 3.11, and so you must have a version that is lower than 3.11. But I recommend that it must be at least version 3.4 and above, not lower than that. Yeah, so that's what I recommend. And so yeah, after you check your Python version, you can then run this command if you do have Python. If you don't have Python, you have to install Python. So you want to go to python.org, and on the downloads, and down here you can download whatever version you want to download, and you can run through the installation. Check my previous video for Python installation, you'll find it there. And so pip install Pygame. After you run your Python installation, you can run this one, pip install Pygame. Because I already have Pygame installed, I'm not going to run this installation, and anyway, it's not going to be as successful because in my global environment I have 3.11, which is not compatible. It's incompatible with Pygame, and so just make sure you install Pygame, and then we are good to go. So this is what I want you guys to do to prepare for the next tutorial. You must ensure that you have a text editor installed on your computer. So I recommend that you use Visual Studio Code. It's quite good. And so you go to Visual Studio Code, code.visualstudio.com. This is the website. And so if you're on Windows, if you're on Mac OS, if you're on Linux, you have all the installers here. So you download the one that is suitable with your platform. Right, so after you run the installation and everything, I think we'll be ready for our next tutorial. In our next tutorial, we're going to start building games using Pygame, and we're going to see how we can create a game using Pygame. The game that we're going to create, we're going to create Tetris. So that's the game that we're going to build. And so we're going to start from scratch and move all the way until we finish. And you guys will see what it takes to build games in Python. Alright, so I want to thank you for your time. I hope to see you in our next video. For now, I'm out. Bye bye.